Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this week's edition of Look Who's in the House with Michael. I have my distinguished guest, Jonathan Roman, with me today. Jonathan is a real estate attorney here in New York, Long Island specifically. Jonathan, welcome.
Thank you for having me, Michael. Appreciate you having me here and taking the time to talk to me.
Yeah, man. Hey, listen, I don't actually do a lot of interviews lately with industry guests. You know, people kind of get bored with it a little bit. So I've been talking to people from different backgrounds, careers, even sometimes family members. So this week I thought it'd be interesting for us to chat, kind of go through it, and maybe give some real estate advice out from an attorney's point of view. All right.
Sounds perfect to me.
But I have to start at the beginning because that's the way my brain
Sure.
works. Where were you born and raised?
Born and raised in the Bronx. So pretty close to Van Cortlandt Park, Co-op City, bounced around. And then when I was in middle school, my parents decided to move a bit north, Putnam County, to kind of get out of the city. You know, my parents were originally from the city. They just kind of wanted to get some, get talking real estate, get a house, get a yard, get some acreage. So we then moved to Putnam County, specifically Carmel, New York.
This is the dream. This is the dream to move out in the burbs and get a house.
Exactly.
What kind of careers did your parents have?
Sure. So my dad, he's actually from Puerto Rico. So he immigrated when he was in high school, and he was bounced between being a mechanic, having his own mechanic shop, and also being a butcher. So
that's interesting.
yeah.
So there's the butcher with greasy fingers.
Exactly. Yep. 100%.
You can't get that stuff out from under your nails. I know.
Exactly. You can't, and so he did that, and my mom is still currently a nurse in a Westchester Medical Center in the operating room.
Oh wow, an OR nurse. That's hardcore.
Yeah. So she's she's doing that, and my dad's semi-retired. People my parents' age, I feel like are never totally retired. Especially with the mindset of you work until you die, and then that's it.
You're a heartbeat away from telling me I'm your parents' age. I just know we're right about that. What about siblings? Do you have siblings?
Yeah. So I have bigger family. I have an older sister. She's also a nurse, also works with my mom. And then it's me. Then I have two younger brothers, one of which works with me at my real estate firm.
All right, so you got one is a nurse and one's working with you in the real estate firm. What do the others do? What kind of careers they have?
The youngest one, he's just graduated from college about a year or two ago, and he's currently in between jobs, but kind of trying to find his place. I feel like job market's not the greatest in terms of what he's looking to do, so he's just trying to figure it out.
That's all right. There's nothing wrong with that.
Exactly. Yeah.
What kinds of hobbies and interests did you have when you were growing up in grade school? Were you into music? Were you into sports, art? What were we doing?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, huge music guy. So I like every single sort of genre of music there is. And I think that's what we were talking about. Definitely, I played a bunch of instruments. In another life, I would have pursued that, but here I am. So music was huge for me. Sports was huge for me. I still play some men's league hockey up in Westchester. So
hardcore.
Still doing that. And
that shows your age, because once you get over a certain age, you're not going to go banging around on the ice with somebody.
Yeah. So we're playing. So we play some men's league. And that's really, a little bit of everything: sports, music, movies.
Did your music influence come from your parents? Were they very into music? Did you grow up with it in the household?
Sure. Yeah. Always. Definitely Latin based. Old school, oldies, classics, Latin influence. So yeah, definitely always.
Where it comes from. We have music in our family, and a bunch of us have it, and some people don't. And when the parent has it, it seems to somehow get passed down, whether it's a choice or not. And I see the same with athletes. If a parent's a good athlete and the kid's into it, they end up being a good athlete too. So, with your musical choices of performing instruments, I presume you took lessons in school. Maybe did you ever play in a band in anything with any of those?
Not really with a band. I definitely, it was mostly just lessons, chorus, band. Would play around with some buddies. I still have some buddies we'll jam around with. But not like, no band, no anything like that. No dreams of being a band leader, in a band. But I jam around with buddies every once in a while.
All right, so we're coming up at the end of high school, and it's time to make a decision in life.
Sure.
Where were you at? Did you know what you wanted to do when you were graduating high school?
No, no, no idea.
No idea.
No
Did you
idea.
did you go to college right away?
Yeah, yeah. So I went to Iona Prep, which is a all boys preparatory school in New Rochelle in Westchester, and then from there I went to Fairfield University in Connecticut. So
Very fancy. It sounds like your father with the greasy fingers and the butchering, and your mom did a good job of setting you up.
oh yeah, yeah. I mean, guess I couldn't be where I am without them, and they sacrificed. My mom worked nights, my dad worked double shifts, and they sacrificed. I mean, my high school is not cheap, considering.
Right.
Considering the alternative, which is free. So they did everything they could to help me out and set us all up for success. So,
What were you studying when you first went to college?
uh, so uh, Fairfield is good in that you kind of really don't need to know right away what you want because it's a liberal arts school. You get a lot of your cores done first year. So it's
Right.
kind of like a broad spectrum of classes. So I was in the business school, started there, and then probably didn't declare a minor until I was a little bit later on. I declared a minor junior year in finance.
Okay.
So
That's a
was
good
looking,
background.
yeah, I was looking to go the finance route, and graduated with a bachelor's in science in finance, and I had a minor in business law.
So now you graduated, you're standing there with a diploma in your hand, and you're thinking to
Yep,
yourself, now what do I do?
yeah, 100%. And as a finance, so I graduated college in 2007 as a finance major, which is probably the worst time to graduate as a
Yeah,
finance major.
yeah, right,
When the market had just crashed,
right.
nothing, really going on. Everybody, the guaranteed internships into jobs just went away. So, I was kind of in between, like thinking like, what am I going to do here? Like, I can take a job cold calling for like 20 grand a year, like just cold calling 9 to 8, or kind of maybe figure out an alternative. So, I started working with a private jet company in Westchester, in their like kind of like in their accounting department, customer service department. So kind of was like, my sister had worked there, and I like temped for them for a little bit, and I was like, look, and then they had a full time position. I was like, yeah, let me give it a try for a little bit. And so that, and while I was doing that, then kind of trying to figure it out, my choices. I was like, am I going to pursue the finance degree? Do I get a master's? But always in the back of my head, always kind of been interested in law. In high school, I'd gone to law camp a couple summers. I had the concentration in business law in college. And in the back of my head, I was always like, well, maybe I'll pursue it. Maybe let's see what
I
happens.
just got to stop you. The concept of law
Oh,
camp
yeah.
just sounds sexy.
Yeah, right.
It's like in the
Yeah.
movie One Time
Yeah.
at Band Camp. I'm
Yeah,
like, nope.
one time law camp. Yeah, yeah. I promise I'm a lot cooler than the law camp would lead you to believe. But yeah, yeah, did law camp in DC for a couple of summers, and just always kind of had that interest in the back of my head that law is definitely an avenue I might pursue.
So when did you make the decision to go into it and really dive in?
Yeah. So it kind of so probably about, I would say, I think it was 3 years after I graduated my undergrad. I was like, okay, well, with the worst case, let's take the LSAT. Worst case that happens, I just don't go, right? Or I pursue something else. So studied for the LSAT over the summer, took the LSAT, did pretty good, applied to law school, got into a decent amount, and kind of just that point decided to move forward
So
with it.
when you jump into law school, at that point, nobody knows what kind of law they're going to practice, correct? You kind of just generalize,
Correct. Yeah.
right? So, and how many
Yeah.
years do you go to law school before you become a lawyer?
3 years.
Okay. So along the way, what were you thinking that your Evan, you might be? Did you always know you were going to head toward real estate? Did you fall into it? Where did that
I
evolve?
kind of fell into it, to be honest. But law school was great. But it doesn't of law, right? Okay, here's how you practice law. Here's how you write. Here's how you research. But it doesn't kind of give you like, okay, well, when I get out, what am I going to do? What am I going to practice? What specific law may I do? Or if I want to open up my own shop, how do I go about it? So it's kind of, the Wild West of just figuring out what you want to do, taking some courses that like kind of interest you, and kind of maybe you have a general, affinity towards. And so, I kind of always line myself up with like business law. So, I was doing like, more like contracts, UCC, mortgages, things like that. But still, no idea. But the full focus is let's get through law school, let's survive it, let's pass the bar, and then we can kind of figure it out.
You know, I think I told this story through another interview to my audience once before, but when I was in my senior year of high school, we had a lunch break at the end of the day and had to come back for one class. And it was business law. And it turned out a bunch of us hooligans turned out to be our favorite class. It
That's
didn't
funny.
mean we were still hooligans. We went out for lunch and it was hard to come back and really be dialed in and really participate. But we all kind of got it. I really enjoyed it. And it was the kind of class I actually didn't have to study for because I really absorbed the information. So I've always had an interest in that side of things myself.
Yeah, yeah, that's funny. That's interesting. Yeah, and
So
it's
what are
super useful and super applicable.
of course, yeah. So
Yeah,
what are the steps that got you actually into the real estate end of it?
sure. So it's kind of a long road to get there, but so I graduated in 2012, which isn't a great time. It's funny. Was '07 wasn't a great time for finance majors, and 2012 not a great time for lawyers either. Just because
Why?
there was kind of like the bubble, not bubblehead burst sort of thing, but like a lot of firms were scaling down on their hirings. A
Huh.
lot of firms had hiring freezes. It was just kind of like it's all cyclical, right? So
Was that a trickle down effect from the economy that had crashed 2 years
yeah,
before? Okay.
exactly. Yeah, so it was kind of still, firms were on hiring freezes. So I kind of, I graduated, studied for the bar, took the bar, passed first time, and then
You-
and then started applying, and then it was just kind of like I probably submitted upwards of 100
Wow.
applications to different firms, and a lot of them again were just like not hiring on a hiring freeze. So that I finally got a couple job interviews. One with a firm in my first was a firm in Westchester doing plaintiff side like default servicing, so their foreclosure work on behalf of the banks. So started working there, got the job, started working there, and that's where I started picking up some litigation, motion practice, learning how to write, legal research, things like that. And so, but wasn't doing really real estate per se. It was just really representing banks on their foreclosure, and continued to do that, grew in my position, and started to learn like the REO side, right? So when a property goes through foreclosure, most of the time the bank buys it back, and then the bank from there will then put it on the market themselves, and then have a standard closing, with title reports, all that. So that's where I kind of started picking up
Let me
the
just interject.
absolutely,
REO is a term we use very liberally in the real estate world. Not everybody understands what it
yeah,
means. It means real
sure,
estate owned, which means the bank owns the property.
yep, yeah.
And,
So
and there was a time when that was a good market for investors to buy property at a discount, be able to get in there and repair it and flip it and make some money. But it's really not like that anymore. The banks are still selling those properties now pretty close to market value.
yeah, that's the thing. There's not really not too much of a deal because oftentimes the arrears are just so high, like the amount that the borrower hasn't paid. So usually the asking price at the auction is usually tend to be pretty high. So
I, I
there's
also,
not a lot of meat on the
yeah,
bone.
and I also understood it to be that they wanted to keep the appraisal values in the neighborhoods, right? Because the bank may own other properties in those neighborhoods,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's kind of
right?
like a
Because if you're discounting these houses and you're throwing the market off it's just it throws it out of balance.
for sure. Yeah, if you have a foreclosure across the street, yeah, you're trying to
Yeah,
sell. Well, why are you going to devalue essentially
yeah.
another one of your assets? So that's where I started to kind of start picking up the real estate side of it. Still doing still doing majority litigation, but starting to pick up the transactional work. So was at a firm in Westchester, then moved to a firm in Midtown, right across the street from Grand Central, doing the same thing. And after a couple of years there, I just kind of was burned out and was kind of just looking for a change.
I can
So
imagine in a corporate environment doing that kind of work, you're just processing paper all day long. Maybe not even on the phones talking to people a lot, right?
Yeah. A lot of it is, there were court appearances too, so it's a nice little breakup of between in the office and out of the office. But at the end of the day, it's crazy hours and right, just writing, writing all day, court all day. So I just kind of got burned out and was just like, why am I doing this for other people when I can probably just do this on my own?
Okay.
So
So next
I
move is you go out and hang your own shingle.
Yeah, so I previously had a couple partners. So one of my buddies who I worked with at the firm in Midtown, we would always like talk about it, be like, maybe we should kind of just do this thing on our own. And he had connections with family real estate, agents, and we just kind of decided to do it one day. So pulled the trigger, opened our own shingle.
Were you based out of Westchester?
No, New Hyde Park actually.
Oh, New Hyde Park, right.
Yeah. So where I am still today. We were both living in the city. I was living in the East Village at the time, and so we kind of were like, well, we have a lot of connections in Long Island, but also want to be close to the city to get that city business.
Yeah.
So we just figured New Hyde Park, just being on the border of Queens, but in Nassau was a great location.
That is a great location. On the personal side, did you marry?
Married, yeah.
Children?
So not my daughter, but I consider her my daughter, but stepdaughter, my wife's daughter from a previous marriage.
All right. What kind of work does your wife do?
So my wife is actually almost done with her master's. So she's going to Fordham for social work, and she's got one more semester left.
My audience already knows this, but that's what my daughter did. She's a licensed clinical social worker.
Oh, that's awesome.
She's already gone that path. So offline, if you ever want to chat or if you want to connect my daughter for a little coaching, a little head in this direction, we should do that because she's a little further ahead in her career now, and some of the hard stuff is behind her. She works for a big company now. It's a little bit more under control, but she's gotten all her, K-Sax and all the stuff for drug addiction and been in the Phoenix house. And,
that's amazing.
Not a high-paying career, that's for sure.
Yeah. My wife would love to pick her brain about stuff. So, I like to say, like, she's the benevolent side of us, of the marriage. And I'm the business side here.
You're the capitalist.
Exactly. Yeah. Unfortunately.
I'm pretty sure that when you go to the voting machine, you go in different directions.
We're actually pretty good aligned that way, but yeah, okay. but yeah, she's the one doing good in the world here.
Yeah, I always feel bad for my daughter when we're in a room and people are talking politics and there are people who are a little too far to one side, and she's taking care of people who need services who can't get these services. So it's a different perspective.
For sure, yeah, it's truly a great thing that they do.
How old is your daughter?
11.
Okay, that's a pretty active age.
Yeah.
What kind of stuff you got going on there in the house? You going to soccer fields, dance, stuff like that?
So she's in Scouts. So she's doing that. A lot of the Scouts activities, camping, hiking, working on merit badges. It's cool. I was in Scouts too, so it's kind of cool to be like, oh yeah, I did this. Or,
of course.
Yeah.
I don't know if you know this, but in our networking group, we have at least one person that runs a Girl Scout in Suffolk County. She runs a whole organization. So.
Oh, nice. Yeah, I did know that.
Yeah.
We've definitely talked a couple times.
Oh, that's cool. Good. All right. So, you with your partner practicing residential real estate for the most part?
Yeah, we do commercial. I still do commercial, but probably like a 75 resi to 25 commercial.
Yeah.
Percentage wise.
When did you guys kind of go your own way?
So, in terms of me and him splitting, or
doing your own thing.
Yeah. So we did our own thing from 2016 to shortly after the pandemic. So, we had an amicable break, which is good, which is better than a lot of partners can say, business partners. He just kind of took him in another direction. Instead, he took over the family. Yeah, he took over.
Your ideas change.
Exactly. So nothing. Yeah, we're still friends, still amicable, but we just went different ways, and so we were together from 16 to 2021.
Is he doing the same kind of work as you, or did he go in a completely different direction?
So he went to take over the family business. So he's still doing some real estate, but his family has a restaurant out in the Hamptons. So COVID happened, and he essentially went to take over that from the in-laws, and so he's doing that. And Still
Poor
doing.
bastard.
Yeah, I feel real bad for
I did 30 years of that. I
him.
know what he's into. Trust me.
Yeah, but he loves it. He's passionate about it. It's a whole family
Well,
business.
I can
So
imagine after having his head down, grinding away, doing the legal thing all those years, that isn't very sexy. And
yeah,
for initially, the restaurant business certainly is. You're meeting a lot of people. It can
sure.
be fun and exciting, but certainly after a 30-year career like I had, it hits the grind hits the
I'm
wall.
sure. Yeah, for sure. So yeah, he's still doing that, but still doing some real estate as well out east in the Hamptons.
Good for him.
Yeah,
So let's talk about your current business now. I'm cognizant of the time, so I want to
sure.
make sure we have time to talk about it. You're mostly residential, some commercial, and for the most part, if I'm not mistaken, being a real estate attorney is mostly transactional based, right?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. There's, I do some litigation correlated to real estate, but primarily it's transactional.
Yeah. Do you practice any other kinds of law that are maybe near it? As some attorneys spread their wings a little bit so they can do more than just the transactional sales of real
Sure. Yeah.
estate.
So I do some landlord tenant. I do some estate work. Probating wills,
Right.
registration. All kind of correlated to real estate. And I still do some of the old plaintiff side bank work that I used
Okay.
to do.
That keeps it interesting.
Yeah, it keeps it interesting. Keeps me a little bit diversified.
When I meet with my clients and when I talk to them about buying a home and I talk to them about what the cycle looks like and who the people are going to be involved in my team, one of the things I explain to them is when you're hiring the attorney, it's not the most expensive part of this whole thing. It's really not.
No, in the grand scheme of things, it's definitely in the lower end of
It
the
is. It
expenses.
really is. And I remind them they get paid at the table and you're not dealing with that up front. Up front, it's more about your deposit, it's the bank fees and all the rest of it. But you to be a successful real estate attorney doing residential real estate, you got to do a lot of transactions. You got to meet people. You got to be referred. You have to do a lot of transactions. That's the bottom.
Sure. Yeah.
What is it you like about doing residential real estate work?
It's like a happy time for people, right? So it is a nerve wracking time. It's like one of if you're representing a buyer, one of the biggest expenses they'll ever see. But it's also a happy time, right? It's about new beginnings, making new memories on the sell side. Maybe selling a house that they grew up in and had memories in, and it's just kind of it's nice. It's not fighting. It's not for the most part. It's not argumentative. It's hey, you represent the seller, I represent the buyer. Let's figure out this transaction and make it close, and hopefully create some happy memories for the buyers or sellers.
You've literally stated what I've said many times on video and social media is that it's really about the service. It's customer service.
Sure.
I'm from hospitality, and I enjoy working with somebody who I enjoy helping them reach the American dream. They come from another country, they move into the city, they grind away, and all of a sudden they have money and they move out to the suburbs and buy a house. And it's just a story. I enjoy that. And I'm glad you said that because it is more than just a transaction. People don't realize we enjoy helping people during a happy time like that.
Yeah, for sure. And it's, the American dream, right? Buy a house, like, as we were talking about earlier, my family, my dad immigrated from Puerto Rico, and here we are later, and it's just that being able to get yourself up, pick yourself up, and just kind of just reach your dream and go from there. And it's and everyone's story is kind of unique and different, and it's cool to meet new people, see where they're from, see what they're doing, and go from there.
Do people stay in touch with you over the long haul? Do you try to stay in touch with past clients?
Sure. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
I definitely try to stay, and I get a ton of repeat business, which knock on wood is awesome. I have people who buy a house and then 2 years later they'll reach back out and say, Jonathan, you still doing this? The house you bought, now we're selling. So it's I try to keep in touch with my clients to the best that I can, and a lot of clients I have will reach back out and just retain me for different matters. They'll say, oh, that condo I bought, I'm now renting it. Can you help me with the lease? Or, looking at, the start of a new business. Do you do that? Do you set up LLCs? Which I do. So kind of, yeah, it's great.
That's cool. How do you stay in touch? Is it through like email? Do you send cards at Christmas? I mean,
I don't send cards at Christmas, but, emails, texts, just kind of follow-ups. I was quoted in the New York Times, on an article last year, and I had multiple clients reach out and were like, "Oh, I saw you in that article," and I was like, "Oh, thank you." And we just kind of caught up, and it was great. It's great to hear from
that's
them.
a lot of fun. Good for you, and congratulations on getting a little spot in the times like
Oh,
that.
thank you. Yeah,
Well, we got a few minutes left. Let's talk about real estate a little bit more detail.
sure.
Usually, when I'm working with a buyer, I'm introducing them to the people that they need. Most of the time, they don't come with knowing an attorney, knowing a loan officer, or a home inspector. Um, and I walk them through the cycle, and then we go into offer and we get an accepted offer. And it's at the time I'm about to write an offer is when I tell them, now I need to know your attorney information. What advice would you give a first home time buyer? When is it the right time to connect with you? Is it before that or is it right about that time?
It's right about that time, but kind of every situation is different. If an agent's like, hey, I have this offer, they might use you, I'll reach out to the client and say, look, like, if you would like to retain me, here are my services, here's my price. And, if you have any questions, ask me. Like, I know I'm not retained, but like, feel free to, if you have any questions, just, shoot them by me. But usually around, the offer being submitted, that's kind of when they should start reaching
That's when
out,
it
doing their
starts.
due diligence. Yeah.
Yeah. The pandemic taught us all how to do things on Zoom. And a lot of legal stuff went to docu-signing and stuff, so we don't have to come into the office for everything. But do you end up meeting your clients in person at some point all the time or most of the time?
So really, it's the kind of a whole new world. But pre-COVID, I met 99% of my clients in my office. Hey, we're in I have the contract, come in, sign, put the down payment down, and then we'll go from there. So I met all of my clients pre-pandemic. Now, post-pandemic, it's completely flipped. I probably need 1% of my clients before the actual closing, and everybody else, Zoom call, phone call, and then I'll meet them at closing. And sometimes it's like, it's funny. Sometimes me and the other attorney be like, is that your client or my client? Because we just will we won't have met yet.
Yeah. And it's funny because now that we've all figured out how to use Zooms and FaceTimes and all the others, we've become good at it. And it's easy. And you know what? I don't have to get in a car and schlep with the traffic and get to an office and
Sure.
on the end of a work day. I'd rather come home, eat dinner, and get on a call. So I think there's a lot of positives to it.
Sure.
Ultimately, when we sign contracts and stuff, a lot that's all getting done through DocuSign and whatever now. But they got to bring you the check.
Sure.
You got to have the money for escrow. Do people FedEx it to you? Do they transfer it to you? Is it mailed to you? How does that usually happen for
Sure.
you?
So I always tell, if I'm representing a buyer, I always tell my buyers, like, we can either do a wire to the seller's attorney, because the seller's attorney who holds the escrow, or, if we're going to send a check, let's make sure that it's FedEx or UPS, with overnight mail and with a tracking, because first off, time is of the essence with these deals. So you don't want to send a check first class mail. It takes 5 days to get there, and the sellers have gone with another buyer because it took them forever. So
I'll lose my mind. I would lose my mind as an agent in that situation.
And I have oftentimes when I represent the seller, I'll have the other attorney or the buyers send it by first class mail. I'm like, well, what are we doing here? So it took 5 days to get to me. So always.
I'm sorry to interrupt.
No, you're good.
I was just going to say,
yeah.
In the process, this is one of my urgencies. And the reason this is so is because we live in an area right now that the market is driven by a low inventory, and we have very few homes to sell, lots of buyers, and this is what makes it a seller's market. So we have to do Johnny Hustle. We have to hustle. If we don't move fast, the seller gets nervous and they move to the next guy really quick. It's not like a slow market where people are like, all right, I'll get there, And so for me, I always tell my client, ultimately, from the time we get an offer accepted, I want you in full contract in 10 days. And that's a doable goal sometimes.
Yeah.
Unless there's a holiday, a storm that interferes. An attorney maybe is in court for a day or two and can't read the contract when it comes. Or you get the buyer who just doesn't get the level of urgency needed. They get to the end of the day, they FedEx the check that gets there, and then you can't get it out. And I just lost 3 days just like that.
Sure. Yeah. And the last thing I want, I am pretty anal about reviewing my contracts like as soon as I get them, because the last thing I want to do to a client is, have them lose a property because I took forever to review the contract.
Right.
So, times of we're in a unique market where, like you're saying, lack of inventory, and, especially as interest rates come down, the pool of qualified candidates is then going to grow again. And you're going to have, again, same thing where 50 people are fighting at an open house to get a contract. You get an accepted offer. The last thing you want to do is take forever and lose it.
Yep, I'm watching the clock. Charlie's reminding me. I think we got about 5 minutes maybe, so I wanted to kind of get a couple things out of you quick before we sign off and say goodbye.
Sure.
Right off the bat, what's the basic advice, the first advice you would give to a buyer?
Associate yourself with people you can trust. I would say, you have an agent for a reason. Someone like you, Michael, where they trust, and they trust, and them to give them referrals, right? Again, like we were talking earlier, most people don't have a real estate attorney. You're going to do this a couple of times in your life, but you probably don't have one that ready. And it's good to do your due diligence, but also rely on referrals from your trusted real estate professionals. And ask questions, shop around. Like you don't just go with the lender you got a pre-approval from because you banked with them for 30 years. Chase doesn't know who you are.
Yeah.
Shop around, figure it out. Do your due diligence, check reviews. Trust your attorney resources you have and referrals.
Yeah. I tend to give more than one referral at a time so that they feel like they have a choice.
Sure.
But knowing that I have experience with these folks to know that they're going to do the right thing and get it done right. I also sometimes feel like people presume we want to work with some people because there's something in it for us, but there really isn't. What's really in it is the quality of service for the client and the fact that we all are on the same campaign to get the deal done to satisfy the client. All right. Again, in the effort of time, what about on the selling side? What advice are you going to give to a seller? What's the first thing you want to tell them?
To be upfront and honest with me, right? The process is gonna go a lot smoother if you let me know if you did any extensions or improvements without taking out the proper permits or certificate of occupancies, right?
I never even thought about that. Are people trying to slide that by you?
Sure, all the time.
I'm representing them. It's going to come up. Why would they try?
Exactly. Yeah, and I don't think it's more a manner of misrepresenting them, just being like, oh, well, it is what it is. I did that. I didn't think it was a big deal. So I would say that just be honest, be communicative.
That's hilarious.
Yeah, yeah, and also just have patience. It's good. Unfortunately, New York is a different animal. Other states you can close in 2 weeks. Here we're talking like 60 to 90 days here. So don't. And
I always tell them 90, man. I don't see 60. I just don't.
Even on a cash deal, you may be looking at 45. So just be patient. It's a process, and on the sales side, it's a lot of hurry up and waiting. The buyer's doing most of the moving parts.
What about an investor? What advice do you have for investors?
Do your homework. The flip you may think you're making easy money on may not be that easy, right? You're talking. Make sure you have your numbers worked out, researched, look at comps. Because you may be taking on a project that is just not worth it, or there's no margins for you. If you don't do your homework.
Funny you said that because I often tell people I watch television too. I watch the real estate shows. I watch the flipping shows. They make it look easy.
It looks so easy. Yeah, here you go.
It's all happening in 20 minutes.
Yeah.
They don't understand it's 6 months with hard money and all the rest of the stress.
Yeah, exactly. A bridge loan, where you interest only for 6 months, and then you run out of money, and you just didn't make any money on a project you just spent 8 months on. So
I would be surprised a lot. Listen, there are investors and flippers at all different levels.
Sure.
But if you're new at it, if you're doing low volume, you need to associate yourself with a team. You want a realtor to go ahead and do the comps for you. Somebody who's been doing large volume, they know how to get those comps on their own. They know what they're looking at. So again, I'm concerned about time.
Absolutely.
Jonathan, terrific speaking with you today. Jonathan Roman. So in the effort of time, I see our time is expiring. Jonathan, it was terrific speaking with you this afternoon. It's Jonathan Roman. And I'm looking forward to talking to you again. We'll have some more follow-ups. And we're going to post your contact information here for our audience. If anybody wants to reach out to you with questions or ask about some services you provide, they'll be able to reach out to you. Again, Who's in the House with Michael will be up on TikTok. We'll be on Instagram and Facebook. The long version will be on YouTube and Spotify. It was a thrill to have you this afternoon. Thank you so much, Jonathan.
Thank you for having me, Michael, and I appreciate it. And if you ever need anything, let me know. And great being on, and look forward to being on in the future.